Welcome to the Mobile Workforce Podcast, where we sit down and have real conversations with business leaders that have been where you are. During these interviews, we'll dive into what it takes to improve systems and champion processes that maximize performance. Each week, our trailblazing guests share their experiences and understanding of the workforce to help inspire change, challenge our thinking, and share what it takes to successfully travel the road to profitability. Now here's our host, co-founder and chief evangelist of About Time and WorkMax, Mike Merrill.
Hello again, this is Mike Merrill with the Mobile Workforce Podcast. So excited for today's episode and launching 2024. We have a great conversation with Mr. Brian Hodge. Brian is a leadership consultant, and he has a company called Helping You Build Strong Teams, LLC. Shares some amazing information here. Great for us personally at home and in our personal life as well as professionally, especially as a leader in a construction company or any type of entrepreneurial environment. So excited for you to have a listen here. And we actually enjoyed this so much, we record next week as well. So let's jump into the episode and get to the goodness. Well, welcome to the podcast today, Brian. Really excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
You bet. Looking forward to it. So to start right off, let's just talk about the kind of the core of a lot of what you do professionally. And when you hear the term or someone hears the acronym EOS, what does that stand for and what does that pertain to what you do professionally?
Yeah, so EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It comes out of a book entitled Traction, written by a guy named Gino Wickman. It is fundamentally a great system for entrepreneurs to accomplish a couple things with their team. Number one, get everybody on the same page about what the priorities are, and then get everybody rowing in the same direction. And, it's not just Gino. You can point to a lot of different resources that the power of the team really comes from everybody being unified in what the priorities are and in lockstep helping each other accomplish those goals. EOS is just one of many systems out there to help entrepreneurs clarify what the goals are and get everybody marching towards them.
I love that.
And
go ahead.
Sorry. And so all I do is I help people put the concepts in that book into action. It's easy for people to get overwhelmed by, there's so many tools. And it's like, okay, let's just start with this first element. Then we'll move to the next element. Then we'll get your level 10 meetings going and that kind of thing. And being there as kind of like almost like an IT help desk guy, so that when they get stuck, they can just have somebody to call up and be like, hey, this thing isn't working. How do I fix it?
Reference back to the book then as a sort of workbook. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a great book, but there's other books out there. And one of the questions I like to ask people is like, okay, you're into EOS. Maybe you heard some of the Sirius XM radio ads or something. You heard about it from a friend. Why EOS? Why Traction? Why not these other books? Because when you look at them, it's kind of scary how similar they are. They all have like a single piece of 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that's going to be your strategic plan. They all have periodic goals. They all track weekly activities that predict the future. We're going to put progress towards those goals in some really highly visible space. And then we're going to have weekly meetings to talk about our progress. And so I don't care, if you want to make up your own system and call them pink leopards and purple cows or whatever, you're going to have goals, you're going to have weekly activities, you're going to have weekly meetings, and you're going to put your progress up in a highly visible spot. And EOS, like these other books, the reasons they have those 5 elements is because that's how you get humans to move. It just draws on the basic mechanics of human psychology and of team dynamics of how do you get a group of humans to get stuff done.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that the book Traction is a fantastic book. It's been quite a few years since I read it, but I remember it still. And just like you're saying, it's bringing up things, comparatives and examples in my brain that came from the book that I have implemented in everyday business. And I hear people refer to that book pretty often within this community. So I think it's awesome that you're really diving into it, helping people consume what it has to offer.
Yeah, it's really fun. And, Gino talks in the book specifically about the level 10 meeting format, that the problem solving component of that weekly meeting is where the quote unquote magic happens. And, my encouragement to anybody who's, maybe frustrated with business and meetings in particular is you can actually have a meeting and have people like glad that you had the meeting, and have people actually like make the statement like, wow, I feel like, and this is a quote I hear from people, I feel like we actually got something accomplished this meeting. And the reason they feel like they got something accomplished is because we debated a difficult issue and we converted that pain into a to-do, and we got really clear about who is going to be responsible for doing what to get that to-do done. And that's how people really benefit from the system.
That's beautiful. So the obviously EOS entrepreneurial, now that a lot of people think of founders, they think of the owner, they think of whoever's initial idea it was when they hear the term entrepreneur. But how does that pertain to management, to the team that might be alongside or underneath that in the triangle of the business setup?
The system works best when you run it all the way through the whole organization. So it's tempting for companies to start off with running the EOS stuff. Let's just call it scorecards, rocks, the level 10 meetings at the executive level. And you can do that for sure. But it works better when you cascade it through the organization so that each department, whether it's the accounting department, whether it's the scheduling department, whether it's purchasing, whatever, each department has their own rocks, their own, priorities, and they're also running the level 10 meeting format. Now, at the department level, it might not be a full 90 minutes each week because the issues that they have to discuss are not as complicated. So it could be a shorter meeting format, but they're going to have rocks. They're going to have scorecard items. They're going to have their own. They can even go as far, Mike, as to have their own VTO. So for those who are not familiar with EOS, VTO is that vision traction organizer. It's that single piece of paper, two-sided, one-page plan is what they call it. And I've seen departments where they have their own, even their own core values, their own niche, and that kind of thing to help that group identity.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when we're talking about management and the leadership team, I will say, obviously the number one key in anything is with people working together, trying to accomplish a common goal would be communication. What does this do to instruct on having better communication, and what are some of the pillars to what supports that within the book?
Yeah. So with a group, with a leadership team, yes, communication. And I think some of the practices that the book helps teams, leadership teams in particular, with communication is how they articulate their goals. And so anytime that we're going to build a rock, and all a rock is a 90-day goal, we're going to articulate that goal. And it's a discipline of writing it down in such a way that we really can tell it's been done at the end of 90 days. And that's a practice. That's an exercise. So, goal setting is not unique to EOS, but the EOS methodology of setting goals on a regular basis will help with that clarity on communication. The other thing it helps with is the weekly activity. So everybody on the leadership team is accountable for one or more weekly activities that predict the future. So you're going to have dashboard items such as, what our revenues are, but you're going to also have future-looking things like how many cold calls do we do? How many times did we reach out to customers that are behind on their bills? Because if I'm off on calling people who are behind on their bills, that's going to predict a future cash problem. And as we get together as a group, we're establishing like, okay, this is the thing that I'm accountable for. And now I have to show up in front of my team and tell them, am I off track or on track with fulfilling my commitment to the group? And that gets in a little bit deeper into the teamwork and communication, but it's going through the discipline of being really clear about who's responsible for what, and then disciplined about coming back together and being clear about, am I holding up my end of the bargain for the rest of the crew?
Okay. So within within this framework that you teach and that you help coach companies to adopt, what does it do to address or encourage having those difficult to have conversations when you're trying to communicate? Because I know that seems to be the crux of most people's issues is I didn't quite find the right time to have that difficult conversation. I wasn't feeling it or ready to have that right now. And then eventually those things just don't seem to happen.
Yeah. So there's a lot there. I mean, I could go on and on about difficult conversations. I love them. And I find that I forget who the guy was that said it. It's not my idea, but he said, when people don't know what to do, they don't do anything. And it applies to how too, right? So if I don't know how to do something, I'm much more likely to not do it because there's risk there. And especially if I'm not sure what to do or how to do it, the chances of me messing it up go way up. And then my own fear mechanism, I just get paralyzed by fear of like, I could really screw this up. So when it comes to effective team meetings, right? So let's go back to the leadership team meeting because we got difficult conversations in different vantage points. I got to go have a difficult conversation with somebody out in the field because they're just dropping the ball. We need to have a difficult conversation as a team. Patrick Lencioni is who I'm just a massive fan of all of his work. In his book, Death by Meeting, he said, he compares the importance of meetings and the different types of meetings to kind of like different sitcoms or entertainment things that we have. And he says, in any story, the thing that makes it entertaining is conflict. And so he says, for your meetings, okay, this is a good, quick litmus test for like how good are your meetings is there conflict? Is there constructive conflict in the team meeting? Because if the leadership team is not having conflict, then that's a sign that they're probably not doing the hard work of like hashing out really good decisions and wrestling through the toughest issues of the day. So the step one is measure, are you having conflict at all? And if you're not, what Patrick recommends you do is you start looking for where we should be having conflict. Outline some rules in case like it's not healthy conflict. If you're screaming at each other, let's make some ground rules. Like, okay, we're going to let each other talk while still entering into the danger of disagreeing with each other. And then Patrick talks in his book and Gino Wickman references a lot of Patrick's work in the 5 dysfunctions of a team. The reason we want to have conflict is so that we can move to commitment. Okay, so in a leadership team, the way Patrick Lencioni describes it is we first have a certain level of trust and vulnerability-based trust where I feel like, you're not going to beat me over the head with my own weaknesses or hold things against me. I need to have that trust so I can have the confidence to enter into conflict. I need to enter into conflict so that we can get to commitment. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, on a leadership team, we're not always all going to agree, but we need to commit. And the only way that we can truly commit, even when we don't fully agree, is if we've had that venue where I can say, I disagree with that. I'm not sure that's the best approach. Can we talk more about this? And because if the team is not committed and they're just kind of like, well, yeah, we'll see how far Larry's decision gets them down the road now. We're not going to accomplish things as a group. So, I mean, that's a really good example about how difficult conversations are really important to make any system, whether it's EOS or otherwise, work. Now, when it comes to difficult conversations out in the field, what I like to guide my leadership development clients through is like, we think conflict and it's like, all right, it's Fight Club. It's on. It's like, all right, let's get ready. And so what I like to guide folks through is like actually how to de-escalate it and how to take the tension out of it. And to give people a very like sequential map of like walking through it. And I highly advise like write your notes down, have your notes in front of you so that, your heart rate gets elevated, you're breathing, you're sweating, you're nervous about this awkward thing. you need a place to look right back to and be like, oh, okay, here's the next point I'm going to. But in a nutshell, I have guys approach it as like, instead of looking at like a difficult conversation of like battle, we're going to walk through a series of 3 agreements, and they're very simple agreements. And it's like, A, do we agree that there's a pattern here? And if I bring like my specific examples of you doing things that could have been caught on videotape, it's not me calling you lazy. It's me just like, hey, I noticed that, you were 5 minutes late here, 5 minutes late there, and 5 minutes late on this other thing. Do we agree that there's a pattern? Then I can move to the next agreement of like, let's talk about the impact. When we're late, how's that going to look to the team? How does that impact the client? How does that impact our reputation in the community? How does it impact our ability to serve other people? So then we're agreeing on the impact. And the last thing is, okay, this is your steaming pile of poo. How can I help you with it? Like, you got to clean this up. I'm here to help you clean it up. But those 3 agreements of, do we see a pattern? Do we see the impact of this pattern? And how can I help you fix it? But when you can kind of demystify the difficult conversation and give people a step-by-step approach to getting into it, it makes it easier.
Track every dollar for each project with Foundation, America's #1 construction accounting software. Follow the progress of your jobs and track expenses with construction billings, WIP reporting, construction payroll features, and accurate job cost reports. Build profits with precision. Get Foundation today.
Yeah, you're taking the emotion out of it, and you're also defining it in a way that nobody's honestly going to, with a straight face, be able to disagree and say, oh, this is fine. There's no issue here at all, right? Nothing to see here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the only way that somebody could say, yes, I agree that there's a pattern of my bad behavior. And yes, I agree that it's having a horrible impact on the world and I don't care. The only way you get there is if you're an evil monster. And so, and I actually had this with a client where they were describing a difficult conversation they had with somebody, and it was wearing their PPE, their protective gear, and like, their glasses and stuff. It was a manufacturing facility, and they were like, yeah. So we pulled this woman aside. We're like, do you realize, like, if you're not, you're always not wearing your glasses, and if you don't do that, you might get hurt. And she goes, yeah, because if I get hurt, then I won't have to work. It'll be great. And it was like, okay, you just self-identified as an evil monster. Yes. You need to be like, if you don't care that much about your own safety, you're an absolute walking liability to the others around you, and you got to be let go. So the other thing that we do when it comes to difficult conversations, which I think is fun, and we do this in the class, is like, I'm like, let's build out the contingency plans. Like, don't wait for the person to break down in tears to figure out how you're going to handle it. Don't wait until the guy gets all sorts of defensive to figure out how you're going to maneuver around that. Like, let's identify what potentially could go wrong here, and then let's build a game plan for each one of those scenarios.
Yeah, that's great stuff. We hear the term or the phrase that people say, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. And I just love that this brings that elephant in the room right out in front of everybody in a circle, where you have the opportunity to discuss that elephant and decide, is it bigger than we thought, or is it something that's manageable? And usually, if they're getting to that difficult conversation early and they're having good communication, it's going to be a really small elephant. It shouldn't be a big deal to address and move past, right?
Yeah, it is. One of the things that Gino talks about in the book, he references or it might be Patrick Lencioni, but there's this Thomas Kilmann conflict model. And it says there's 5 approaches to conflict, and everybody has a natural preference. And the important thing to realize is that our natural preference is not always the right approach, and we really, and it's important as a leadership team to recalibrate, like, what do we need to do here? Do we need to compromise, or do we really need to fight for a true collaborative approach where everybody wins everything on their agenda list? And I see teams that are either quick to compromise or avoid the thing altogether. And so there's this approach that I would encourage anybody listening, next time you're having a group discussion, the natural tendency for leadership teams in particular is to jump to conclusion. Let's jump to like what the solution is, without taking the time to really understand, the issue and the contributing factors. And so I have teams kind of like walk through this exercise where I'm like, first of all, put the problem into a complete sentence. Like, let's use our words to actually make a problem statement. Next is I have them describe the pain. Okay. So I got my problem statement. Let's imagine you're going to a doctor and he's asking you, okay, so I understand your arm hurt, but like, how does that impact your life? Well, it's difficult for me to like take a shower and I can't close the car door. And so tell me about the pain that comes from this problem and how it's negatively impacting you, your life, your business, and that kind of thing. But stay focused on answering the pain question. Then answer the unknown question. So what do we not know about this issue? And there's usually a bunch of like, we're missing data. We don't really fully understand the impact. We don't know what all of our options are. But like list them out, write them down, use a whiteboard, use those big easel pads. And then last category is go through the knowns. What are we absolutely sure about regards to this issue? Known constraints, that kind of thing. And so we got the pain, we've got the unknowns, and then we've got the knowns. And when you slow a team down, they're just like, I had this happen in Philly just like a couple weeks ago. They're like, that was awesome because we followed that process. We weren't able to jump to conclusions and to solutions too quickly. It really helped us think about it differently. But the other thing I love about that process is when you're looking at that list of unknowns, it's like a ready-made to-do list of like, okay, let's make some of these unknowns into knowns. Who's going to do it? Who's going to go run down like what the pricing is on this thing? Who's going to run down like what the actual timing of this other thing is? And it makes it's a simple process for a team to get better results out of their problem-solving discussions.
Yeah, and what I love about that is it dovetails right back into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, and that's having better employee engagement. So they're feeling like they have some ownership. There's a reason to plug into this. They have homework, so to speak, right? They've got a to-do, which means they also need to come back and report their results. And it's like when you think back to elementary school, or at least for me, if I actually, finished the homework assignment on time and did a good job, I was actually excited to go that day and share the work that I had done. Now, if I haven't done the work and I'm not prepared, I'm dreading going to school because I know inevitably, the teacher's going to get after me and I'm not going to get a good grade. So tell us about that a little bit more, about better employee engagement through this process.
Yeah, I love the topic of employee engagement. It's absolutely essential. There's another way of expressing it, and it's kind of like you can tell when your employees care, or you can bleep me out if it's inappropriate for your audience. But what I hear my clients saying is like, how do I get my guys to give a shit? And it's like this age-old question. Really, what they're talking about is employee engagement. So let's break down what employee engagement is, why it matters, and what people can do about it. Number one, what employee engagement is. Employee engagement is quite simply the emotional connection I feel to the company such that I'm willing to give discretionary effort. And, I work with guys in the trades a lot. I'm like, let's just get it out of the way. Yep, we said emotional. And guess what? Your employees are human. And that means by default, they're emotional beings. And we can not talk about that, or we can use that to our advantage. But you want that emotional connection so that they're willing to give the discretionary effort. And discretionary effort, that's that little bit of extra gas in the tank that they leave every day. That little bit of extra energy, hustle, attention to detail that they choose whether or not they expend that energy. And so that could be extra attention to detail and quality. It could be a little bit of extra hustle to get things done. It could be anticipating problems. It could be being a little bit more vigilant on making sure the work site is clean or safe or whatever. And so when I feel that emotional connection and I expend that energy, great things happen. Gallup has studied this and rechecked their work more than 10 times over the last 20 years. What they find is the difference in highly engaged teams and less engaged teams is measurable. And we're talking like 70% fewer safety incidents. Safety incidents. You think about all the time and money that companies spend on safety training, and they do that to reduce the amount of safety incidents. And they're still left with like a residual amount of safety incidents. If they could cut that in half or better without another second of safety training, it's worth talking about. Absenteeism, less turnover, less defects, better profits, higher sales, like 20% better profitability, 40% less absenteeism. So that's the reason why. That's the economic reasons why we want to be shooting for highly engaged teams. And then, Gallup gave away what's the biggest influence. They gave away the answer on the cover of their book, and they said it's the manager. Okay, frontline leaders have the biggest impact on employee engagement. And so, I'm just like, it's not a woo-woo mysterious thing. It's got a measurable economic impact, and there's practical things that the leader can do to do that. Now, to tie together a little bit of EOS and frontline manager leadership out in the field, we, as humans, we're goal-seeking creatures. So the more that you as my leader can make it clear, like what the measurables are, what the goals are, and just be real simple about what those expectations are, that's the number one question in the Gallup survey that measures employee engagement. And it's a statement that asks people to agree or disagree with the statement, I know what's expected of me at work. It's the fundamental, most important thing. And that input comes from the frontline leader.
Yeah, I was thinking of an example as we were talking earlier about, the manager or somebody being 5 minutes late. And, we're in construction also, right? And I was a contractor. I was a framer, so I understand this very well. But it's like if the manager's 5 minutes late, well, then the employees aren't as plugged in. Even if let's say we're framers and I would have cut and nailed 5 boards together in that 5 minutes, a board per minute, pretty reasonable. Well, if the manager's not there, I may nail 0 or 1 or maybe 2 together. And if you've got 100 employees, you may have hundreds and hundreds of boards that don't get framed up and nailed together and cut in that 5 minutes of that morning. You stack that up over a week or a month or a year, all of a sudden we're multiple buildings behind completion because of that 5 minutes. And so it's crazy how quickly it can get out of control when you really drill a hole in the bottom of production, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I hear managers want their employees to look like they care. And then I watch those managers. I'm like, okay, let me watch how you run your meetings. Like how you got to do your, whatever you call it, your little safety briefing or whatever it is at the start of the shift. Show me some freaking enthusiasm. Does it look like you want to be there? Does it look like you care? Care about the work, but care about the humans, and Gallup's got another statement in their Q12 that they can directly tie somebody's agreement to performance. And the statement is this: my manager or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. Now, this is not my manager, greets me every morning with a fresh cup of coffee and a hug. This is not my manager, my manager gives me high fives 3 times a day. This is not my manager, valet parks my car and picks up my dry cleaning. You know what I mean? This is my manager or somebody at work seems to care about me as a person. That is not a high bar. You know what I mean? That is something that like every one of our managers should be able to crush that goal. And how do you seem to care about somebody else as a person? It's like, be interested, man. Find out like what they have going on in their personal life. What they do for the holidays. What are they excited about, for the upcoming season? What's their goal for the year ahead?
Yeah, it's interesting. You said that's not a high bar. It's so true, and yet how often do we hear? And I know if you watch a sitcom or just the funny, casual, sarcastic conversations that happen around the water cooler, or whatever, you contrast that ownership that people are taking of the project because they like their manager, they communicate well, they get along, versus somebody who can't stand their manager or they feel like the manager can't stand them. They're not going to run through a wall for you. They're going to avoid the wall at all cost, and they're going to do everything they can to get out of getting through that wall. And if that's what the company needs to have happen, it's probably just not going to happen, right?
Yeah, no, it's an incredibly difficult thing to turn around. But I think in the trades in general and construction and manufacturing, I get the question, why is it particularly, why are leadership challenges particularly difficult? And I think we got to drop back and look at the audience. Okay. These are guys who like working with their hands. They like, technical things, physical challenges. They're not into sitting still and having elaborate conversations verbally. Right. And so they get really good with their hammer, and then somebody taps them on the shoulder. They're like, hey, that thing that you're really good at? You're not going to do that anymore because we need somebody to fill in this manager leadership role. And we wish you all the best with that. So they could put into these roles without a lot of equipping, training, and a lot of bad ideas. For example, one of the bad ideas I hear out there is that, if you don't hear from me, that means you're doing a good job. Right. And this actually gets said, you know what I mean? As like a good thing. Like, if you're not hearing from me, that means you're doing good work. And I'm just here to tell you, there is not a shred of evidence that that's effective for giving feedback to an employee.
Yeah.
And it's the worst thing in the world, because now when your name shows up on their caller ID, guess what they're thinking? They're going to run. Yeah, they're going to run. So being interested, being clear, two things every manager can do a little bit more of today. And if you're a manager of managers, I'm like, I'm going to go off topic, so sorry, reel me back in if you want. But I think a good litmus test, especially for folks that have foremen and frontline managers out there in the field, I'm like, how good of a trainer are your foremen? And one of the things I see is that there's kind of foremen can fall into two categories. The foremen that are good at training, they like doing it. And then the foremen that just expect, I should not have to train anybody. Your job is to give me a good framer, electrician, whatever, and I tell them what to do, but I don't train them. And I'm just like, man, if we can break down that mindset a little bit, and not a little bit, entirely, and just be to be a leader equals being a trainer. And we can help you break it down with a tool to take the mystery out of training. But man, every leader is a trainer.
That's beautiful. That's probably a good note to end on for today. And I think we just really scratched the surface of frontline managers really engaging with their employees. So maybe we'll have you back on next week and talk a little bit more about that. But this has been such a fun conversation. Is there anything, Brian, you'd want to leave the audience with as a final thought before we wrap up today?
Yeah. I mean, every minute counts, every minute where you're on site and you get a chance to interact human to human, look them in the eyes, be interested, make notes afterwards if you need help remembering what you guys talked about, so that you can demonstrate you care about the most important people in the world. And that's the people on that job site.
Beautifully stated. Well, thank you, Brian. This has been a great conversation. I've had a lot of fun today.
Thank you. It was awesome.
All right. We'll catch up again next week and see if we can do this again and cap this baby off.
Thank you for joining us today on the Mobile Workforce Podcast, sponsored by About Time Technologies and WorkMax. If you liked the conversation we had today, or were able to learn anything new or helpful, please make sure to follow us on our WorkMax page on LinkedIn and on Instagram at WorkMax_. And subscribe to the show on iTunes or your preferred podcast platform so you will never miss another insightful episode. Also, if you enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review and share the show with your friends and colleagues. Your support means the world to us and will allow us to continue providing impactful information with others looking to improve their results in their business and, in turn, their life.